Jackie with Bee Mom. All right, we're back to reading books. Yay! And I'm going to try to stick to my every Friday thing and post one on Friday. I know there's been a couple that have been on Saturday and they've been every other week, but we're kind of getting back to a regular schedule, so we should be able to get stuff done and wrapped up, and so I can put it on Fridays. So today we are reading by H.A. Rey, Curious George Rides a Bike. Here we go. Curious George Rides a Bike by H.A. Rey. This is George. He lived with his friend, the man with the yellow hat. He was a good little monkey, but he was always very, curious, right? This morning, George was curious the moment he woke up because he knew it was a special day. At breakfast, George's friend said, "Today we're going to celebrate because just 3 years ago, this day, I brought you home with me from the jungle. So tonight, I'll take you to the animal show. But first, I have a surprise for you." He took George out to the yard where a big box was standing. George was very curious. Out of the box came a bicycle. George was delighted. That's what he'd always wanted. He knew how to ride a bike, but he had never owned one of his own. "I must go now," said the man, "but I'll be back in time for the show. Be careful with your new bike. Keep close to the house while I'm gone." We'll see if he does. George could ride very well. He could even do all sorts of tricks. Monkeys are good at that. For instance, he could ride this way with both hands off the handlebar. He could ride this way like a cowboy on a bronco. And he could also ride backwards. But after a while, George got tired of doing tricks and went out into the street. And here, I'll show you all the pictures on that page together. The newsboy was just passing by with his bag full of papers. That's how they used to deliver. Some people still get papers called newspapers, and the person would come. And it used to be he'd ride by on his bike and he'd toss it into your yard or on your driveway so you could come out and get it in the morning. And now I think they put them in a special mailbox. But anyway, so that's what the newspaper boy is doing. "That's a fine bike you have there," he said to George. "How would you like to help me deliver papers?" He handed George the bag and told him to do one side of the street first and then turn back and do the other side. George was very proud as he rode off with his bag. He started to deliver the papers on one side of the street as he had been told. Then he came to the last house and he saw a little river in the distance. George was curious. He wanted to know what the river was like. So instead of, turning back to deliver the rest of the papers, he just went on. Uh-oh. There's the street. And there's George delivering the papers. There was a lot to see at the river. A man was fishing from a bridge, and a duck family was paddling downstream, and 2 boys were playing with their boats. George would have liked to stop and look at the boats, but he was afraid the boys might find out that he had not delivered all the papers. So he rode on. Do you have a park near your house where people like to go and look at the water and walk around and play in the water? Most people don't play in the water nowadays, but that looks like a lot of fun, I think. While riding along, George kept thinking about boats all the time. It would be such fun to have a boat, but how could he get one? He thought, and then he had an idea. He got off his bike and took a newspaper out of the bag and began to fold it. And he folded the corners like this. 1 second and we'll show you. And you are about to learn how to make a paper boat. He folded up both edges, then he brought the ends together and he flattened it sideways. He turned up one corner and then the other, and then brought the ends together again and flattened it sideways. Then gently he pulled the ends open, and there was his boat. So now the moment had come to launch the boat. Would it float? It did. So George decided to make some more boats. Finally, he used up all the papers and had made so many boats that he could not count them. A whole fleet. There he is, putting other people's newspapers into the water. It's a bad idea. Oh, here's his fleet. He watched his fleet sailing down the river, and he felt like an admiral. But watching his fleet, he forgot to watch where he was going. And suddenly he felt a terrible jolt, and the bicycle hit a rock, and George flew off the seat head first. Luckily, he landed and was not hurt. But the front wheel of the bicycle was all out of shape, and the tire was blown out. And there he is flying through the air, and with his sad bike. George tried to ride the bicycle, but of course it wouldn't go. And so he started to carry it, and it soon got too heavy. George did not know what to do. His new bike was spoiled, and the newspapers were gone, and he wished that he'd listened to his friend and kept close to the house. Now he just stood there and cried. Suddenly, his face brightened. Why, he had forgotten that he could ride on one wheel. He tried, and it worked. He had hardly started out again when he saw something he'd never seen before. Rolling toward him came an enormous tractor with huge trailers on it, and looking out of the trailers were all sorts of animals. To George, it looked like a zoo on wheels. The tractor stopped, and 2 men jumped out. "Well, well," said one of the men, "a little monkey who could ride a bike bronco fashion. We can use you in our animal show tonight. I am the director of the show, and this is Bob. He can straighten your wheel and fix that flat in no time. Then we'll take you along to the place where the show is going to be." So the 3 of them got into the cab and drove off. "Maybe you could play a fanfare while you ride your bike in the show, the director said. I have a bugle that's right here. And later you'll get a green coat and cap, just like Bob's. There they are, fixing up the bike and riding in the truck. Finally, the show was on, and the whole town had come to see it. And how surprised they were to discover George on his bike right in the middle of it. The newsboy was there too, and also the man with the yellow hat. He had been looking for George everywhere and was happy to have found him at last. The newsboy was glad to have his bag back again, and the people from the other side of the street, whose papers George had used to make boats, were not angry with him anymore. And when the time had come for George to say goodbye, the director let him keep the coat and the cap and the bugle. And then George and his friend got into the car. And went home. Yay. Good night. Okay. I think thus far, this is my favorite one. This is so cute. Okay. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and thank you so much for joining me. If moms and dads are watching this, why, subscribe to the channel, Becky B Mom, and go ahead and like this if your kids enjoyed this story. I posted a video a little bit before about how I am starting straightening up my pantry and how I kind of organized it. And so you can comment there, and I don't mind if you comment about books that your kids like too. And so that would be awesome, because then I can pick more that they like. Thank you so much. Bye.